So the round one for the 2021 and 22 Arts and Cultural Funding Program is currently open. Funding for individual artists, arts and cultural workers and groups, arts and cultural organizations, and funding and creative query funding. So the round is closing on the 18th of August 2021. And today we're focusing on the Contemporary Music Artform Board. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you for being with us today, as we are here with two incredible members of the Contemporary Music Artform Advisory Board and two recent successful and amazing Create New South Wales recipients, all of whom I've had such a pleasure to meet and get to know, and who will share with you their thoughts and tips, as well as toward the end we'll try and get through as many questions and answer as many questions as we can toward the end. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce John, Oddy, and Jane Slingo, who are members of the Contemporary Music Artform Board, and Sally Coleman and Vulindlela. Sorry, how do we pronounce your last name? It's so incredible.
That was right. Just Vully is fine. Just Vully, V-U-L-I, like woolly with a V is perfect.
Vully.
Yeah.
Excellent. So Vully and Sally are recent recipients in the 2020-2021 Create New South Wales funding. So it's really great for you guys to be joining us and taking the time to share some of your thoughts in this webinar. I really, really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So before we jump into it, because there's a lot that we're going to be talking about, and there's a lot to share. So I just wanted to quickly go over the assessment criteria. With the merit section in the application, you will need to describe what your project's vision is, what are the key objectives of your project and program, and how they demonstrate excellence. Who are the key project personnel and partners, also including CVs or biographies. What are the key activities of your project, including what your project plan is, and providing samples of work and confirmation letters or support letters. Next slide, please. The impact. So what will be the overall impact of receiving this fund? What change will occur if you deliver this project? Who will benefit your project? The number of audiences, participants, artists, arts, cultural practitioners as well. There's also the audience impact, who your audience, and what you will do to increase, improve, and or change their participation. And art form impact, how your project program will innovate, expand access to, or advance your chosen art form. Next slide, please. Also, the assessment process considers the priority areas at the final stages of the assessment, which can be seen on the screen at the moment. So you'll need to provide details on the engagement and provide letters of confirmation, support, or endorsements where applicable. And so with this in mind, I'd like it to pass it on to John to chat through and speak with our the speakers and just chat through and hear some tips and advice on what can help make a strong application. Next slide, please. And so, John, please, if you'd like to kick it off, it would be really, really amazing.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Ian. And I just want to say thanks to the Create New South Wales staff team for putting this together, and also to Sally and Vully for joining. Something that I've wanted to do for a while, and, you know, speaking to recent recipients and showing other people what we're sort of looking for to spread awareness, increase the number of applications, and also increase the quality of the applications. So what we're going to try and do is go through the sort of some tips and some common mistakes we sort of see in applications that the board receives. And this will probably be more directed at writing the grant application and what to include, and and what we're looking for, and what sort of separates a really good application from a not so good one. So it won't necessarily be about the admin side of things. It's just about that sort of grant writing skill, and I think it's something that a lot of people need to have in their skill set, whether they're an independent artist or a manager or an event organizer, because not everyone has access to grant writers and such. So I want to start by probably going to the supporting material. And that's the sort of things that can include letters of support, your demos if you're a recording artist, videos, all sorts of documents that you can attach to your application that help give us an idea of what your project is. And I thought it'd be a good starting point to go to Sally Coleman's project, which was the Big Sand EP, because I can speak on behalf of other board members. I'm sure Jane would agree that was a really impressive application. So we can go to some of the other slides. I think it's the next two slides that shows some of the storyboarding, but it'd be good to throw to Sally just to explain what her project was and how she came about including some of this support material.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks, John. So the project that I applied for with Create New South Wales is called Big Sand. And one of the things I think I really struggled with in my application is that it's a pretty ambitious project. There's lots of different elements. I really wanted to include visuals, and the whole idea of the project is that it's a fictional science fiction band that brings together illustrators and animators and a whole bunch of different musicians. So I was like, how am I going to, explain what I'm trying to do here, and how am I going to give a really clear vision of what that looks like? And that was a big challenge for me when I was writing my grant. So the way that I decided to do that was to use my supporting material to give a little bit more in the way of examples and visual stuff. So what I ended up using for that is Canva, and I don't know how many people are familiar with Canva, but it's super useful. It's a free online platform that is great if you don't have heaps of design skills like me. You can just pick a template, put in all your images, make it look a little bit nicer. And so I did a bit of a Canva presentation for some of my supporting material, and this is the first slide, which just gives an overview again of the project. A lot of this I already had in my grant application. But I think if you go to the next slide, what I also tried to do was include a lot more visual material and like a clear, color scheme and narrative and things about the project that might be a little bit harder to convey with words. So I think maybe that's what you're getting at, John, is like the supporting material is a really great chance to add video, add music, add visual content, and stuff that's a little bit more difficult to convey when you're just typing into Smarty Grants.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, that's 100%, because I remember your project was quite an ambitious one. It involved technology, and the supporting materials really helped give the idea of the vision. Like nothing was really left to us trying to figure out what is this. It was quite clear. So it was a real standout in terms of the types of things you can include in supporting materials. One other thing that we find is a common mistake is sometimes when people put in demos, or if it's a recording project, sometimes they will not have up-to-date recordings, or they won't be from the project itself, whereas you actually had demos from what the project was going to be. So that also helps in terms of supporting material. I'd just like to, if we have anything else to add on just the storyboarding aspect of Sally's application, I just wanted to talk about support materials as well in terms of letters of support. It would be good to know from either Vully or Sally how you went about getting letters of support, and what was the process around that?
I can speak to that if you want. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Vully. I play in a band called, just to give you context, I play in a band called True Vibenation, and we've sort of been touring through Australia and internationally for the last few years, obviously not since COVID internationally. And we've also been concurrently, since our early 20s, running music workshops for young people, and so that the project that we ran, that we applied for and got the grant for, is to run music workshops for up to 25 participants throughout Sydney, regional and Western Sydney. So on the topic of support letters are one of those things. The main thing that you can do is I guess if anyone has any experience with press releases, it's a pretty similar thing where you kind of, they take a long time to get, and also it's best to really explain and make clear what you're wanting from that support letter. We found that if you just send out support letters and ask people to say, hey, please, say that you support my project or we've worked together, you might not really get back the information. So it's good to at the very least put in key dot points to cover, and really, make sure that that's sort of as clear as possible, and you get onto that as early as possible. That was a general way that I approach support letters.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. I think that's a really good tip, is that you can't just provide a blank Word document or just ask somebody from scratch to provide a support letter. You need to make it easy as possible for the person that you're looking to get a support letter from. You can have a quick Google, and there are template letters of support that you can do, and you can provide them a template of what you don't need to put words in their mouth, but you can provide a template of the idea of what you're getting at to include in the support letter for your project, and give them room to insert things about their organization and why the project succeeding is important to them. Another tip is the types of stakeholders or persons that you get support letters from. It does depend on the project that you're applying for. But for example, if it's a recording project, you might have a support letter from a producer, or from, if you're putting on workshops, some things that might be helpful is if you have local council involvement, is to have a letter of support from them, or one of the community organisations as well. And just speaking about community organisations, I thought it'd be good just for the Vully as well, about how you went about, because yours is bringing a workshop to sort of regional areas. How about you went about obtaining those networks?
Well, I guess so. Yeah, our project was to run music workshops across Sydney and regional New South Wales and Western Sydney. And we sort of originally started that because we're all African Australians, we're culturally and linguistically diverse, marginalised communities. We grew up in Western Sydney, and so that's always been a passion that we've done. And so over the years, we worked in a lot of the community centres, and also we made quite a conscious effort when we tour outside of Sydney to visit and find the champions of local communities and the people who are running workshops and the people who are running positive things within the community, arts programs, things like that. And yeah, finding a way to tie them in too. I believe Create New South Wales actually has a regional offices that they've opened up recently, which is probably a really good way to think about how to get in contact and see if you can bring arts projects to those communities. But I'd say essentially it was that we'd run projects in there before, and I guess when we sit down to do grants, my general sort of aim, the idea of the grant is to show that you're basically a project that's ready to go, but with a bit of financial supplementation. It's not only possible but significantly scalable in a way that benefits not just the canon of contemporary music, but also hopefully the community in some way, and the artistic community, and also the public community. And yeah, so I guess as we were traveling to those different regional communities, we made those connections and made sure that they knew us and trusted us, so that when we said, hey, we're going to do this project, it's coming up, if we do this, are you keen to have us back? And they said, absolutely, that's great. So we got them to write some support letters. The other thing, and with those connections, and the other tip with support letters is to, where possible, is to get make sure it looks really professional, make sure you've got your letterheads and signatures where possible. And I think that's a really good tip as well. That helped a bit.
Agree 100% on the letterheads. I mean, it's such a little thing, but I've seen, in my time on the board, support letters that look like they were written in Notepad, and it's just a block of text. So it's the smallest little thing, but it does make a difference. So I just wanted to clarify. I think it's already in the chat as well. It's Music New South Wales have the regional music offices, and I think the link has just been posted, which is a resource if you are looking to create a project in one of those regional areas or in and so I just wanted to move on to, so I've got a list of lots of different things that we could go through at the moment. And I just wanted to there was a budgeting webinar, and I hope the link has been posted, but it'd be good to hear from Sally about how, as an independent artist, often that's one of the most difficult things to put together is a budget. And, where did you start with that? Was that the starting point of your application, or did you leave that till the end once you had an idea? If you could walk us through that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just waiting. There we go. I realized Wooly did a really good thing before, which is introducing himself, and I should do that. My name's Sally. I'm a musician. I previously was on Triple J Breakfast as part of Sally America, so you might have heard me there. But I've also been doing a bunch of music stuff for a little while, and my application to Create New South Wales the start of the year was for this new project, which is called Big Sound, which is, ideally like a combination of technology and visual art and music, and involving lots of different collaborators. And so budgeting for that, I guess, was really difficult in some ways because I have done music budgets before, but the first step for me in the process was to go and get quotes, so to do a bunch of research. And it's difficult when you're getting quotes because it's hard to know what you can afford without knowing if you've got the grant or not. So it involves, for me, approaching lots of different people and saying, hypothetically, if I got some money, how much would you charge me? And with the understanding, and a lot of people are very understanding that if you don't get that money or if you don't get that full amount, then it's no lock-in. But the first step for me with a budget is always just doing a lot of research, whether it's how much a mix and master is going to cost or what a gig might cost to put on. Just getting that in writing, and that can be supporting evidence on the application, or it can just be to help inform your own budget. But once I've got as much info as I can, I guess I just start plugging in the definite, I know how much this will cost parts of the budget, which is the easiest bit. And then where it gets a little bit tricky, and I think every artist struggles, is with all those really intangible parts of the budget, like how much is my time worth? How many hours am I going to work on this for? Because you obviously don't know that when you're starting a project. It's all kind of arbitrary and up in the air. But that's where it becomes a little bit of a jigsaw. When you've filled in the definites, then you know, well, if I'm asking for X amount of money and I need to provide 60% in kind or 60% other resources, and trying to do the maths, I guess, in terms of how many of my own hours could I dedicate to this project to show that I am contributing a similar amount of resources to what I'm asking for from Create New South Wales. So I think that's one thing that's always a little bit of a juggle for me, because it's really difficult to know how to value yourself and how to put down things like getting a studio from your mates. What's that worth if you're not paying for it in cash? And that's where, yeah, it does become a little bit of treacherous with your budget, trying to make all those things line up. But the big takeaway that I'm sure you'll reiterate, John, is to not undervalue yourself and your time, to make sure you include that as like one of the big bottom line items in your grant application, whether you're asking for money or whether you're listing it as an in-kind expense, is just going to be your time and your skills and your expertise. So yeah, they're the two main phases for me, is like put in everything I know and I can get a quote on, and then try and figure out what are all these other really intangible factors and try and put some numbers on that. And often that's a process I'll do as I write the rest of the application. It'll be sort of slotting and coming together as I get everything else done.
Awesome. Thanks, Sally. Bully, did you have anything you want to add just quickly about budgeting for your project, given it's a different style of project?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a much easier job because there wasn't heaps of. It was quite specific with how much people were being served and stuff. We were pretty specific about making sure that we didn't charge the participants in this. We're trying to make it free. But I think the other thing, yeah, just to remember with budgets is that really changed my mind. That I learned a while ago, a few grants back. Just to remember that with grants, the idea is they're not looking to save, to just for you to spend as little money as possible and underpay people. They want to make sure that the people who are paid are honoured and make sure that you budget at what would be a fair and reasonable price, which I know is a pretty open thing when it comes to art, and but yeah, that'd be my other tip.
Awesome. Thanks, Bully. Yeah, one thing we have noticed is that sometimes artists aren't paying themselves for their work, and I understand that's a hard thing sometimes for them to quantify when they put in a lot of hard work and they're getting other people to do some stuff on the project, so they're focusing on that. Another thing we also look at is if it's an event, we want to make sure that the artists are actually getting paid. So if someone's organising an event, where's the budget for the artist fees? Is it enough? Because obviously artists are the lifeblood of the industry, so there's a focus on them having some sort of viable income for their talents and an exchange in that. I'm just going to move on to something else from budget. Just want to remind people Create New South Wales did do a budget webinar, and we have someone from the team who would do a financial viability assessment. So that's something that, as board members, we look at the merit and the impact, which Ian had on the previous slide. Financial viability is assessed by another team. So often they sometimes work, correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes we'll work with applicants on the budget if something's wrong. So the application might still be approved, but it'll be conditional on something being fixed in the budget or something if it didn't make sense, particularly if it's a really strong application. But enough about that. I'm just going to talk about some of the requirements of the actual application itself. And you saw when it's based on merit and impact. One of the difficulties in an application is having to explain what your impact is. there used to be quite a lot of different impacts you could select from, but for individuals at the moment, it's now just art form or audience. Before I talk about it, I just wanted to maybe throw to Sally to see how she approached that part of the application, whether that's measuring audience impact or art form impact.
Yeah, I actually struggled a lot with this. I found it quite difficult because if you're creating music, obviously it's going to have an impact on the audience. You want people to hear it. But also it's an art form. So it's not like your application is ever going to only have one of those elements of does it impact, the art form or the audience, or like there's always going to be a lot of flow and effects from you making your music or doing whatever activity you want to do. So I actually ended up, I think, just in terms of my process, when I'm doing a grant application, I don't really like writing in Smarty Grants or directly into the portal. So what I normally do is I go and copy all of the questions and write what the word count is next to them. And then I'll generally do it in a Google Doc just because I find it a little bit easier to do that, find it easier to check the word count, and then I can access it. Like if I'm out on my phone on the bus, I have a great idea, I'll chuck it in that document. And from memory with the impact sort of side of things and that question, I couldn't decide. I think I ended up writing like a little version for both. And I'm not even sure which one I ended up going with for my final application. But what I did do is I used another question at the end of the application, which was about the overall impact of your project. So there's two questions. There's one about choosing a specific impact. And then there's another one later in the application that's sort of about your broader overall impact. And I think I just sort of phrased it so anything I didn't get to when I was choosing the specific impact, I just brought up again at the end of the application. And that was the way I kind of worked around the fact that, my project's a little bit of both of these, was just to use the second question to get to the things that I hadn't covered. And the impression I get from talking to you after that, John, is that there's no right way to choose an impact. Some projects might be really obviously about the audience. Like Lily, I think yours is very community focused. It's really about community outcomes and audience outcomes. But if you're doing a recorded project, like me, I want it to have an impact on the audience, but also I want it to have an impact on the art form. So, I could have gone both ways, and using that second half of the application to just get to the, content I hadn't covered already was good for me and took the pressure off a little bit in making that decision, I think.
Thanks, Sally. That's good to hear. I think as board members in past rounds, there's been difficulties with people trying to slot in their project into a particular impact and then being locked into that, whether that's, audience or art form, or if you're an organization, there was operational. I think there was also cultural impact as well. And sometimes they would select the wrong one. So we're hoping that now that you're not locked into one, there is an option to talk about your overall impact to make use of that. So just in case you have selected one that, it might not be the strong point of your application, you do have that other option. But in saying that, we understand it's difficult, as Sally said, particularly if you're doing a recording project, that you can be both. It can be for your personal growth as an artist and your art form, but also you will have an audience that will be listening to you as well. So it'd be good to hear from Vully now about, because True Vibenation and what he does might be a little bit easier to gauge sort of an audience impact and how he goes about measuring that in his application.
Yeah, I think we had a much easier impact to describe, as Sally was mentioning, because it was really community and audience focused. The easiest part, I guess, was the fact that we were once, the youth doing workshops, and we could describe that impact very qualitatively because we experienced it. But yeah, we sort of focus on a few things. I guess it's the impact on just turning up and having that project run, which is to do with access and opportunity, especially in Western Sydney and regional areas. We focused on the impact for participants in terms of access, self-determination. Other impacts included just personal ones like self-worth, I think confidence, learning to tell their story and having a vehicle to tell their story creatively, and also supporting emerging artists and young and emerging artists, just to record for the first time. And then after the project, so things like we've had participants before who have gone on to have music careers, and people who've gone on to do community work and start focusing on that. People have gone to start up things, and so we're able to put very, very tangible impacts. I guess that's it. Because it is so audience focused, that we didn't really have to speak too much, I guess, to our own artistic impact. I guess the other thing as well, one thing maybe I guess that would apply to loss is if there's more than one person involved in the project, there's always that the impact of collaboration. Artistic collaboration is really important. I think artists learn from working together, and I think that's always important and worth mentioning.
Thanks, Bully. Sorry about the delay. I was just trying to find, I hope this is it, your video from when you guys went to Wagga Wagga, just to post in there. Hopefully that is it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if my mic's working. Oh, yeah, cool. It's worth mentioning that if this video was actually being made as we were applying for the grant, but definitely this would have been our support material if we were applying at that time.
I don't know what I've posted. Hopefully it's the right one. not a movie trailer or something that came up in the ads. Okay, that's the right one. There we go. I see you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks. And that goes to the point of supporting material as well. I'm not sure that's the actual video you put in your supporting material, but we did see videos of your workshops. Go and get it. One quick question is also how you mentioned that you heard stories of people benefiting after the fact, and is there a follow-up, or how did you find out about that sort of stuff?
Well, as part of the project, we include surveys and follow-up, but the really tangible examples we had just been from running them for so long that by the time, but at this stage, we're starting to see some of the longer-term results of some of those programs, and the way and sort of the impact they've had on people. And also, I mean, we tend to get a bit of feedback as well. I mean, music's a good thing in that way, I guess, that you do tend to get a lot of feedback with art and music, and community centers and stuff having their own theme song or something is just super exciting, especially when we're working with like younger demographics, like in their 8 to 12, they just sing the song and probably drive the community workers crazy for a couple of weeks. So maybe the impact isn't always great for the worker, but yeah.
So, thanks, Bully. One thing I also wanted to talk about. Oh, yep, go on.
Oh, I was just going to jump in really quickly on the impact thing and just give some off the top of my head, like things that I listed as like a general impact, because I think Bully, yours is great because you can list these tangible community ones, but I guess I had to get a little more creative with some of the how do I describe this impact? So one of them I think is really important if this is relevant to you is representation. Like if you're not seeing yourself or not seeing something that you're doing out there in the industry or the community, then mention that and say, I'm going to have an impact by, providing representation, doing something differently, being a model that other people can follow. Another one I think I listed is like innovation. So just trying something a little bit new and seeing what happens. And that can have an impact on other people other than yourself, because it doesn't really matter if you succeed or fail, you've provided some new information for them to use when they're creating art as well. So that can be really helpful. And then, Bully, like you were saying, just community building with other artists and relationships and networks. that can be a really big impact as well. So I think impact doesn't just have to be like, I will get 2 million Spotify streams and everyone will love my song. It can be about sort of these other less tangible things. And I think there's a question in there about how will you measure that. And that's where you can get a little bit creative. It doesn't have to be with stats and numbers. It can just be, I want to get one message from someone telling me, you know, why they liked my project or whatever. That can be a way that you measure that success. It doesn't just have to be how many people listened to my song, did it get on rotation.
Thanks, Ali. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, tangible metrics help a lot, like, you know, intended audience, participants, and things like that. But there's lots of intangible things that you can include as well about the benefits of your project. I mean, looking at the Artform impact criteria, one of them is like, how will your project innovate? And yours would be, you know, a definite example of that. I'm just looking at the time, and Ian, cut me off if we need to go to questions at any point. But one thing I just wanted to speak to Sally and Vully about is just general tips about you know, their process for writing applications. Have they used grant writers before? Do you apply for other grants as well? You know, how long does it take for you to put stuff together? Just to give people an idea. Do you speak to other people about, you know, hey, I'm applying for this grant. What's your budget like? You know, sort of those sorts of things. Either of you can take it from me.
Hey, I'll start if you want. I think we would have done synchronized.
Mike's really slow. I'll turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. The unmute takes a little bit of time. I wrote a few dot points, and then maybe I'll stick it off if you want to go afterwards. Sorry. Yeah. So my tips that I remember was be really specific with the project ideas and really make sure you go into detail, as much detail as possible. Really make it so that because often what happens is it's realistic in your head, but you have to make it so that on paper, you know, someone can really see how realistic that is, and understand that it's not a huge gap for it to become. So make sure you include in those details. Start really early, and just keep refining. You know, I think we had 6 or 7 massive edit sessions where we kept on just narrowing down and changing the words and getting it right and seeing everything fitting into making sure nothing double. So I think that's really important. Understand where your gaps are, and get help if you need to. But you know, my budget skills definitely aren't as great, but we had some help around that. And with grant writers as well, we got, not specifically for this project, I don't think, but we've gotten grant writers before, and that's been really helpful. Maybe if it's your first few times writing grants, it can be expensive. So there's different ways that grant writers work. Some work on commission, and some don't. They sort of will assess the project and tell you how they'd like to work with you. But having at least one grant, or even if you can potentially find someone who's had a successful application and look at that, is really good, because seeing a strong application really gives you a good barometer for what works, and what seems to be the right way to talk about it, the right language to use, and the level of detail, and especially in the budget that you have to go to. And yeah, I guess the other thing is do as much pre-prep as you can. Often as musicians, we've done that pre-prep. Like it might just be playing in the music scene for 5 years and having those connections. But yeah, it's really important that, if you have those connections, if you start thinking about those projects, you know, well before even the grant app's open, you can start making those conversations, visiting those places, and chatting to the people, so that by the time even the applications are open, you've got like these networks and these people you can draw on. So yeah, I think that was sort of my top 4 tips that I was going to think of. Sally?
Yeah, I think the only one I'd elaborate on really quickly is the ask for help one. And obviously Create New South Wales is, you know, your number one resource. Just give them a call. Everyone's been really helpful. I think every time I've done a grant, I've come to I think Ian, I've probably even spoken to you a couple of times and should I put this in my budget? Just call. If they can't talk to you at that time, they'll make a time to get back to you. But also there's a whole list online of everyone who got a grant last round. Go have a look at that list, use that resource. If you know anyone who's applying, you can compare notes, like reach out to your community or even just to strangers. And the worst that will happen is they'll say, oh, I'm a bit busy, or, you know, I'm not open to sharing that. But I think you'll find that like 90% of people are so happy to help. So yeah, ask for it, reach out.
I was just also going to give just some insights from an assessor's perspective, and this is certainly something I've seen in assessing for Create New South Wales, as well as some federal grant programs as well. I personally think it's quite obvious when a grant writer has written a grant application for someone, and I think you get a stronger sense of the project if it actually comes from the applicant rather than a professional grant writer. And I think that time is, as Sally just mentioned, is better spent actually getting your application under the eyes of someone who perhaps isn't so close to the project, because they'll be able to give some feedback based on, is it really clear? Can you read it from top to bottom and really, understand the clarity of the project? And the only other bit of advice that I would really give that, John, I'm sure you'll agree with this, we see this often, is in the priority areas. I would recommend that don't tick them unless you are really meaningfully addressing them. So when it comes to, for example, accessibility for people living with disability, for example, I think we often see applicants that just say, of course, we're inclusive of all people, or of course we have wheelchair access. And I think unless there's some kind of meaningful approach to accessibility, your application looks better if you don't tick it than if you have a bit of a half-assed response to those priority areas. And similarly, I think the same goes with regards to, if you are making a claim that you're engaging with Western Sydney communities, for example, it's really important that you authentically either A, are, or B, you have reflected in your application exactly how you plan to, and any associated costs that come with engaging with that priority area can be included, of course, as a cost in the budget.
Thanks, Jane. Definitely agree. We do get a lot of applications that it's tokenistic, where they see that the priority areas that are listed and then just want to tick a box and then put in a really, for want of a better phrase, half-assed answer that we see right through, and it really tarnishes the application. You should focus on what you're good at. If you're making a recording project and you're not touring anywhere or anything like that, you don't need to put in an answer about how you're going to affect regional Australia. I mean, we've had answers where people have said, well, regional people will be able to listen to it. So, it's something that you've got to think about. It's something that, you may need to have consultation about. So, for example, from a disability point of view, you may need to engage a consultant for your event and have them provide a letter of support saying they're willing to work with you. One of our board members, Liz Martin, works for Accessible Arts. I think there are other organisations as well that have sort of even templates that you could use for trying to make your event more accessible. Jane, is there anything else before we jump to any questions?
I think Sally and Vully have done such a great job sharing their insights. I mean, my key, probably other key tip would be to allow ample time. They do take time, and as Sally mentioned, I also think it's really helpful to get it out of Smarty Grants onto a doc, because there's a lot of word count limits that you encounter. The budget is a process in itself. So I would suggest that if you think you can kind of pump it out in a few days, you'll probably kind of create a little bit of stress for yourself, because it is a process going through it. So just Give yourself the time, articulate what the vision, what the overall, what's the overall description of the project first, and then you can at least kind of break down all the different parts. Like support letters would make sense to be one of the first things that you might reach out for, because those things can be underway while you're working on other parts of the application. And having also been a grant applicant myself over and over, particularly last year, there's nothing worse than that, like last minute to a deadline feeling. So really giving yourself, so if we're due on I think it's on the 10th for this one, sorry, on the 18th for this one, I would literally be starting it now, get the Smarty Grants open, and then each day you can chip away a little bit more, and know that those really tricky parts like budget might be something that once you clarify the vision, you really get stuck into the budget first to fine tune that to actually really have that part of it sorted, because if you leave that part till the last minute, it can be quite a stressful experience.
Yeah, definitely want to avoid it being stressful, and if you put in the work and time manage yourself, hopefully it reduces that stress. Definitely want to reiterate the copy pasting all the questions and word counts into a Word document. Not only does it help you just work on it on the fly, but if you also need to collaborate, because I think otherwise you may need to provide someone the login details so they can go look at it on Smarty Grants or export it. So it's definitely, I don't have as much grant writing experience. I've only done a few, but that helps massively if you're working with other people and needing their input on certain things as well. And off the back of, yep, go on.
Sorry, could I just talk back to Artform and audience impact again? I think, sorry to kind of backstep on that a little bit, but something that I think is important to point out is that particularly with Artform impact, I think some applicants tend to think that you're meant to present something that you're kind of changing the world of your art form. And really, I think it's smart to look through it through the lens of your art form and your practice, and what impact is this going to have on your craft and your art form, rather than it's going to have this, sometimes something more sincere that's just about what's that impact for you personally practicing that art form, as opposed to some kind of far-reaching impact. Definitely is more supportive of an application that's received well from an assessment panel, as opposed to kind of making big grandiose promises that may not be possible.
Definitely agree. Avoid the grandiose. I mean, if you're reading it on paper and it sounds too good to be true yourself, that's probably what the board members are going to feel. And another thing as well, just while I have it in my head, is that you have to pretend that the board members don't know who you are or what sort of music genre or, we have lots of people from different parts of the industry, but you have to pretend that we don't know exactly who you are. Often we do. We see very familiar names. So when explaining a project, particularly sometimes we may get some projects that are in the avant-garde space, or you can tell that they're passionate about it, but they need to explain it in a way that everyone can understand, even if it's the most basic thing of when you're writing, have it spaced and avoid rambling. And on that point, as I'm rambling, is that we have included, for those people that aren't really good at writing, there should be video responses now. So if you're someone who just doesn't really like writing, it's not your strong point, or you're not good at the written English language, you can actually provide video responses. This is something that was done in I think other Create New South Wales applications. I think the Powerhouse Museum residency grant, and it was I sat reviewing some of those applications. Really, you could really tell for some artists they benefited from having the video response. I think, Ian, is it time?
Yeah,
or Jane, did you want to say anything more?
I just wanted to quickly invite and welcome Brianna from Create New South Wales as well. So we're just going to try and get through some questions and as many as we can in the time that we have at the moment.
Okay, fire away.
I think I might start just on John's video answer, and there's a question about is video preferred or advantaged over text. We have a webinar on how to make a video, and Tammy will put that link up. There is no preference. It's about supporting accessibility and being able to have you either speak or write, whatever is your strongest way of doing it.
I agree. I was just about to say, I agree. If what is going to give better support to your application is a video, then go that route. And if it's words on paper, then go that route.
Agreed.
And maybe I'll ask specifically, Jane, Mark had a question about, does a mix of brand new works and older classical works, example for a concert, count as new work production? How would you see that in an application?
If you were choosing it as new work, I would be thinking around, I mean, if it's new work for a concert and it's in that context, but you've still ticked that new work box, I think it would have to be, I'm not sure about the details in the guidelines on this point, but there would have to be some kind of majority new work. That's if you chose the new work box, but if it was a presentation of work, it wouldn't be. Sorry, it was just a presentation of work, not new work. It wouldn't be a problem having a mixture of, back catalogue or older classical works with brand new works.
Great. And I think maybe the first one also we had right at the beginning from Mark, this is more a create one. Can you apply for grants for multiple events? You can put one grant application in per round, but how would you receive it as a panel? And maybe John, I'll ask you this one, if there was multiple events in one application?
Yeah, so I might need some clarification, but as I'm understanding it, is this something like where you're taking a project to, you're essentially touring a project, or is there touring a particular type of event, or is this different events but are connected in some sort of way, like whether it's a festival and then there's satellite events? Because I think both are generally, depending on the project, something that we can fund. I don't think there's any restriction on that. So I'm just scrolling through the question Mark wants to explain.
If you want to explain a little, Mark, and just quickly I'll address the COVID question. Create supports variations and changes to any of the applications that need to happen. Generally, our advice that we give out is that you just put a line in that says you'll comply and understand current health restrictions. But I'll hand over to Mark very briefly. I'm going to give you like 20 seconds to explain. Just so we can get through the question. Sorry.
What we were thinking about for our community choir was a grant to help us do a live concert, but we're also thinking having a number of bets, cards on the table of doing a recording, trying to actually record the music separately from the concert. And I thought they'd be two different grants, two different kinds of grant.
You could 100% do that in the one grant application because they're both related to the same project. Ultimately, you're doing a recording of the performance, so you could easily bundle those together.
Terrific.
Yeah,
thank you.
Definitely. You can do a recording and touring off the back of that in the same application. Or some people have a tour and they want to make a film out of the tour.
Jamaica's got a question here too. Hi, Jamaica. The question is from experience. If an applicant is clear and precise in the sections of merit and impact and budget, what is the common difference between a successful applicant and someone who just misses the mark? John, as you know, the assessment board spends two grueling days, and there's often really close applications, and it comes down to a board decision on that, essentially. And if we had all the money in the world, there'd be so many things we'd love to fund. Isn't that right, John?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the aim is that the idea is that if the application is really good, would we fund it? And we would say yes, and then, it gets recommended. Unfortunately, there is a limited funding pool each round that we don't always know what it is. So, it's a grueling process of, having to narrow down some of the best. But we're hoping that, these sorts of webinars and having not just Jane and I speak about tips and stuff, but having Vully and Sally's, people who have actually been through it, are really insightful. Because to be honest, the more applications we get and the more quality applications we get, the better for the board and the music industry as a whole.
And I think there's another one around, would you support the development of a work, and then could an applicant go in for the presentation at a later date as well? Jane, what would you think of that?
We haven't seen that, but there's nothing to me that in the eligibility that wouldn't say that isn't. You mean applying in one round for the development behind the project, and then in a later round to actually produce the work?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's nothing in the eligibility that says, because there would be nothing to stop them from doing that in eligibility, would there?
No.
No, I don't think so. And it's something that might come up if it's a completely new work and an artist has no evidence of an audience that just say they were going to record a project and then tour. They might want to actually create the work first and only apply for that to separate out or make it a little bit easier for themselves for the application process. But as Jane said, there's nothing to stop them from separating and applying for different things.
Yeah. If you did have plans though to create the work, there would be nothing to stop you also from applying for the development and recording of the work either.
I'm just scrolling through questions.
Belinda had one around live streaming that she put into Eventbrite, and I've just asked Belinda if you want to ask that to John, Jane and the applicants. That might be a good opportunity.
Can I speak now? Sorry, I'm Belinda, but I'm actually using my wife's laptop.
Sure.
It's got a flattering camera. Sorry. Just really quickly. We produced a live stream music show that supported 140 musicians, paid 140 musicians through 12 live stream episodes, streamed to 15 really large social media accounts simultaneously. We really want to tour this through regional New South Wales to activate live music economies through regional New South Wales. The only problem is Create New South Wales sort of tends to push us towards Screen New South Wales and Screen Australia, but Screen Australia and Screen New South Wales only fund documentaries and dramas, and they won't fund live entertainment. But as we all know, live entertainment from a promotional point of view is vital to get artists out there touring, and at the moment Triple J is the only broadcast platform that does that. So what are there any suggestions, are there any thoughts that this might be something that's covered by Create New South Wales now or in the future if Screen sort of don't want to do live entertainment? That's my question.
Create's probably going to have to talk to this question more so than I, but is the content of the show contemporary music?
Yes, it's absolutely. Yeah.
And does it have performances?
Yeah, so it's very much based on the model of Later with Jules Holland on the BBC, whereby we have 5 bands on stage simultaneously, and the music just the cameras just follow the action, one band to the next band to the next band, all contemporary music. The show goes for an hour, and we stream to every band's social media accounts, as well as some big social media accounts that have been broadcast sponsors like the Newcastle Herald and the Council and Destination New South Wales and stuff like that. So it's been really, really valuable for the Newcastle entertainment industry, but it's just really difficult because it's this real grey area between, we satisfy all the bullet points with the Create New South Wales grant, but then they sort of suggest that we go to screen New South Wales or Australia, but they won't do live entertainment. So I'm sort of a bit stuck for funding.
Have you actually had a conversation with someone at Create about this, or are you going from what it says in the form?
I am going from what it says in the form, although, I have had a couple of conversations with people at Create as well.
Maybe I'll talk to that. Are we really quick? I'm not Belinda. I think it'd be good to have a conversation offline. Happy to just send me an email, give me a call, because we would fund the live music component of that. And I think it's actually around the way that we look at what the streaming is and how that happens. So my name's Brianna. My details are on the website. Send me an email. I'll set up a meeting and we'll actually have a proper conversation outside of this.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No worries. And the last question from Jessica that I would say is about producing a visual album and a music album. And what would the board fund? Is it just the music part? Do I leave the visual album component out? John and Jane, I'll throw to you on this.
From my perspective, don't leave the visual component. Visual albums, and we are seeing visuals are a huge part of contemporary music and an artistic practice, and I wouldn't leave it out. I would personally keep it in there if that's an integral part of the new work and the album project. Then I would include it. And in fact, one of the recipients, I think it was in the last round, wasn't it, John? What So Not? Yep. There was a really strong visual component to his album. So leave it in, Jessica.
Yeah, definitely leave it in. A lot of people, when they're making an album, and I think Sally can attest to this as well, there's a visual component as well. And that's just, beyond, sometimes people put in applications for music videos, which are allowed as well. But even beyond music videos, having more in-depth visual components, you can definitely leave it in. It's not like we only do audio, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I might hand over to Ian now. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We have, thank you so much for Willie, John, Sally, Jane, and everyone that's attended today's webinar. Really, really appreciate everyone's time. Special thanks extended to those taking the time to chat, and thank you so much, Willie and Sally, for sharing your thoughts. It's been very valuable. And if there's any questions that you wanted to reach out to us, you can always contact us on the number on the screen, and the email on there is that's arts.funding@createnewsouthwales.gov.au. Thank you again for everyone behind the scenes at Create New South Wales to get this the slides going and all the help on the comments below. Thank you so much again, and thanks again to you, Jane, and Sally, John, and Vuli. Much appreciated.